Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the lab. We're going to continue along the lines of our little breakdown of science and performance, recovery and training optimization. My name is Lou Follenkamp, for those of you who haven't met me. Today's topic is going to be about movement economy and efficiency. All right. So whether you're an endurance athlete, you're a weightlifter, maybe you're just trying to get back into sports, improving your movement economy can unlock a lot of new levels of performance while also reducing the risk of injury. By the end of this episode, I'm hoping to provide a little bit more of an insight as to why you'll kind of understand what is movement economy and why it's really important and how we train and also develop. So let's dive in. So number one, what is the definition of movement economy? So if I were to put this in simple terms, right, it's basically just how efficiently does your body use energy to perform a specific task? So think of it as like fuel efficiency for a car. So the less energy that you need to expend, the better your movement economy. So this could apply across a few different examples and disciplines, right? So for runners, it would be about minimizing energy costs at a given pace, right? So are you absolutely working so hard just to maintain the pacing that you can't do it for very long? For weightlifters, it's about maximizing force production with the least amount of wasted effort. CrossFitters, it could be about sustaining efficiency across a variety of movements. So think about like how many different movements are in a chipper, or if you have like 5 rounds of chest to bar pull-ups, clean and jerks, etc. Like that's a lot within a time domain for you to be efficient with. So it's not just about strength or endurance. It's more about like a blend and like how well are your movement mechanics or your biomechanics. So that goes along the lines of like neuromuscular coordination, your energy systems that are going to come into play. But it's wonderful. This is all trainable. This is all things that you can work on as an athlete or as a clinician when you're working with your clients. With the right approach, anyone can improve in movement economy and see the results in both performance and the recovery. So this is fantastic, guys. So, number one, let's start a little bit behind the science of it. So, movement economy is influenced by a few different factors. Three, in particular, I'm going to talk on today. One is just your biomechanics. So, this is about your technique. How well is your body able to align itself? Where, like, if you have poor biomechanics, right, it can lead to a lot of wasted energy. It increases potential risk of injury. Think about like a runner who has more of like a vertical displacement when they're running could mean like you're bouncing too much, which means you're wasting more of your energy in more of like the vertical plane as opposed to moving forward. Neuromuscular efficiency. So like this could be how well does your brain and muscles communicate? So if I can ensure a more efficient neuromuscular coordination, I can get the intensity of firing rate, let alone the rate of firing to be improved at the right time. And then energy systems. So movement economy is tied to how effectively our body is able to use aerobic and anaerobic type systems. A trained aerobic system can basically lead to more efficiency with minimal energy waste. Whereas, like, it's very critical for us to kind of identify what needs to be addressed with a particular athlete or client, especially if that person's coming in to work on their endurance or to rehab and get back to that same running um, competition. You want to have that in mind with these. So look, when you're choosing your plan of care, your exercise prescriptions. So let's go into a little bit more about how am I going to assess movement economy. First thing we want to start looking at it would be maybe a video analysis. So I could begin recording the movements that we can learn more of the inefficiencies of that movement. So if you're a runner, I might look at maybe you're overstriding, maybe you have a very poor arm swing. For lifters, it could be where is the bar path at? So if you're performing a clean and jerk and the bar is getting away from you, you might have to actually overexert yourself in order to bring it back to center. Heart rate monitoring is another way to assess this. So for an endurance athlete, a lower heart rate at any given pace would basically show that you're able to handle that pacing more efficiently. Whereas if it would be me, I'd be skyrocketing up to my 80, 90 percentile for my heart rate zones. Kidding. I'm working on it. Another thing to think about would be force plate testing, right? So if you have access to force plates or dynamometers, handheld dynamometers, fantastic. Tools like that can actually help with measuring asymmetries in movement. Could also help with identifying some energy leaks during movements like the squats or jumps. There's a few different. I mean, we could that could be a whole talk on itself, guys. So we won't go. I won't squirrel and rabbit hole there. But last and not least would be the feedback from coaches or clinicians. Sometimes the person needs an external view or perspective in order to make some changes in the movement, in order to make more efficient and overall progressions with their training. We don't want to have um, an insufficient amount of compensations or imbalances and think it's going to be good down the road when they eventually get to competition. So we want to be addressing all of those things. We want to be assessing all of those attributes. So in part three here, right? So training for better economy. So once you've done all of your assessment, you've kind of found out what their level of efficiency is. We need to start learning how to program and train for this, right? So here's how we can start doing this. Number one would be technique drills. And kind of like what I talked about in one of the neuroplasticity episodes, repetition. So focusing on the fundamentals for runners, this could be, now granted, we're talking more about like high knees, A skips if you're looking at like sprinters, like for like the hip drive. Can also start teaching them more of the improvements for that type of biomechanic. For a lifter, it could be working on technique under submaximal loads, trying to refine the movement pattern, and maybe even the losses of position that can occur through like higher repetitions. If you are trying to train at higher loads, though, reducing the pattern losses at heavier loads, if you're like you're at like an RPE of like 6 to 8, there's going to be some breakdown, but it's how can you get that breakdown to occur less and less at those training loads? One rep max breakdown no matter what. Up to you depending on how you want to train through those types of the one reps. All right. So for strength training, building strength is an absolute key for training. You can help reducing fatigue. You can improve the efficiency through repeated contractions. For example, if you have someone whose glutes just kind of don't tolerate repeated hip extensions, that could be really important for a runner who needs to basically reduce the energy loss as they're moving through their running patterns. For plyometrics, it could be, or like if you're a CrossFitter, box jumps, being able to land and then immediately produce force again, improving the neuromuscular efficiency and the elastic energy use there. So there's a few different things we can go into. I won't do a deep dive, but we could if there's something in particular you want to. Breathing techniques. Oh man, this is fantastic depending on the type of activity you're doing. But having an efficient breathing pattern is usually overlooked and not even taken into consideration most times. So if you can learn how to start working on your breathing during particular training, um, so like I use diaphragmatic breathing as an example. You can actually teach them how to breathe during sustained, basically patterns and movements. So if you have that person who's, spiking their heart rate and they're hyperventilating and they have to back off, that's something that can be really beneficial is to start learning how to breathe during those periods. If you're a CrossFitter, learning how to coordinate all of those wonderful things. So most people don't think about breathing when they're thinking about CrossFit. And if you do, wonderful. I absolutely love you to death. Um, but moving on to another example before I go off on a tangent, zone two training. So if you're an endurance athlete, zone two training can help improve with aerobic efficiency. It allows you to maintain higher intensities with less effort over time. So like training in different heart rate zones can be beneficial in the long run for movement economy. I absolutely love my zone two training right now. It's kind of a mental refresher as much as it is just a training refresher. So all things to start thinking about as you're trying to plan for these people. So here is some examples that I have for you. So let's kind of start applying this. So if I have a runner, right, let's say they're a mid-distance runner, struggling to improve their 5K time. They're training really hard, they're putting their time and effort all into this. They've got a few things in mind. But then we break down some of their movement analysis with in the clinic, or maybe I'm out on the road with them. We can look at the arm swing, right? So we looked at the arm swing. We also noticed that their stride length was really far apart, so we had to break that down. So we started applying specific, so we targeted those inefficiencies and we started applying particular drills to them within strength training and then also within the clinic, just kind of learning what a good stride pattern would look like on the treadmill and then trying to apply it onto the road. Because obviously, treadmill to road, a little bit of a different change there. But you can reduce the energy costs with those mechanic changes because if you're overstriding, maybe you're overutilizing a particular area. But that person ended up having, I think they dropped 45 seconds off of their 5K time, which to them was huge. And they didn't have as much lower back pain and hip pain. So like double win. So that's something to take into consideration. We made modifications to the technique. We took basically addressed the overstriding. We actually started incorporating some lat strengthening for the arm swing because they did really good on driving forward, but the arms never really moved back into extension. Not like a crazy amount of extension, but just kind of creating like the cross stability in that area. Going on to example number two. So the weightlifter. So I had a competitive weightlifter, really inefficient bar path with his clean. He would miss as soon as we got up to a certain percentage. You could see where he was missing in his catch, where as soon as we got past, I think it was 78 to 85% of his one rep max for his clean and jerk. He was inconsistent at maintaining at those higher percentages. What we actually started working on was tempo work, where we had him start doing, and we use lower percentages for the tempo work, but just to start working on a cleaner first pull, and then he would actually learn how to keep the bar closer throughout that tempo work. And then we also started as we kind of went on through, we found that he had some inefficiencies. In terms of his quads, and then he would almost always like when he would do his back squats, we started finding that he was like a stripper fault, so the butt would raise really early. So we started working on a few different squat variations for him to start cleaning that up a lot more. And I like to use the front squat for him because we would basically place the bar so that when he would learn where the bar was resting, if he could maintain that particular position, he could remain more in an upright and he wasn't constantly catching and dumping the bar on the receiving aspect of that. But once we corrected his bar path, we improved his efficiency under those heavier loads, and then he actually ended up hitting a 10-pound PR. So that was fantastic. And no more mid and lower back pain. So double win again. So not everyone has double wins, but it is nice to have those when you get them. Those can just kind of show like those small little adjustments. I mean, we just corrected an overstride with my runner, made some progressions in lat and glute strength, lateral glute strength in particular, and PR time in the 5K, less pain in the lower back and hips. And then for my weightlifter, less mid and lower back pain on the receiving of the barbell and less dumping. So they had more efficiency in the catch and the receiving pattern. So start thinking about these things because sometimes I think we try to make a zebra out of a horse, and we can make a lot of progress with just addressing those through video analysis. So, obviously, again, get permission on recording them, but start breaking it down, seeing where those inefficiencies are at, attack them with your targeted plan. Boom, progress. So in conclusion, right, to wrap things up here a little bit, like I said, small little bites of information over these next few episodes. But movement economy is so critical that we look at one repetition and we're like, oh yeah, squat looks good. But then we look at the next 10 and we're like, oh, your form turns to crap after this. So if we can learn to improve the biomechanics, the neuromuscular coordination, and then also address the energy system efficiency for those like targeted goals for them, you can maximize your results while maintaining energy, like basically minimizing energy waste, also potentially reducing injury. So that's all good things to take into consideration. So a few key takeaways real quick, right? So one, assess your movement economy through tools like video analysis. If you got a force plate, use it. Find those asymmetries. Find maybe where they're lacking on takeoff, landing. Like there's so many different applications. We could do a deep dive on that. Maybe Drake will come back. You never know. Um, but then also incorporating technique drills aside from just strength training. Strength training is going to be my bread and butter every time, but something to take into consideration is just technique drills. And then also, what type of conditioning do you need to start implementing with those repeated patterns? Okay. How are you going to start planning that out for your patients and your clients? How can you make progress with them in that way, keeping them engaged and oriented towards their goals? Third, don't underestimate the impact of small adjustments. They can often lead to big results. Even though that stride that we took, I say overstride, we maybe reduced it like to a very fine degree, not like a huge amount, so it didn't feel completely foreign. And that was enough to make a progress for that person. If anything, I hope you guys um, enjoyed today's small episode. Thank you so much for those of you who have been tuning in over the last two episodes. I hope you found some value in these smaller ones. I know it's still just me, but don't worry, they'll be back, I promise. But please, again, don't forget to subscribe. Please share these if you like them more. I'll keep making these. But until next time, guys, stay efficient, keep moving forward, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.